start recording now. So I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at the experiences I've had with my clients over the years. And I thought of something that Leonard Orr, for those of you who don't know, Leonard Orr is the founder and discoverer of breathwork, the pioneer in breathwork, and that's all forms of breathwork. Began with him, whether you're talking rebirthing breath work, intuitive energy breathing, vibration, shamanic breath work, holotropic breath work, and whatever form of breath work you're talking about, they all began with him. And so what I'm going to share with you tonight is good for you it's good for anybody. If you practice any form of breath work, this will be helpful. If you give sessions to anybody in any form of breath work, this will be helpful. If you're just interested in personal growth for personal reasons, this will be helpful, because it's going to shed some light on why change can be difficult, personal growth can be a challenge, and a lot of the advice that's usually given isn't all that effective. And so I'm studying polyvagal theory, and I've cross-trained with all kinds of breathwork modalities, not just Leonard Orr's version. And I actually use a lot of vibration in my practice, because vibration is really exactly the same as Leonard Orr's rebirthing breathwork, but they explain it better. I don't want to be, disrespectful to my former teacher. He was like the typical genius who wasn't very good at explaining things, because he just kind of thought it was as obvious to everyone else as it was to him. So he often leave steps out, and he would just think it was obvious, and he wouldn't explain it. So one of the quotes that he's famous for is, "The body can heal the mind faster than the mind can heal the mind. The body can heal the mind faster than the mind can heal the mind." So, and so I'm looking at polyvagal theory. I'm looking at childhood trauma theories of Dr. Mattei. And I'm thinking about all the work I've done with clients over the years. And then I thought about this quote, which on a superficial level, I understood. On a superficial level, probably any breath worker could explain it to you. But I realized there was a deeper, more profound meaning to this quote. So the body can heal the mind faster than the mind can heal the mind. Okay, what does that mean? And well, say for example, someone suffers from anxiety. Now, this doesn't apply just to anxiety. This applies to everything. I could use other examples like depression, anger, fear, financial struggles, procrastination, loneliness, bad relationships, weight problems, career burnout. Anything, just anything. But to make it, so that I can explain it, let's just make it an anxious person, and then I'll walk through the entire process for the anxious person, and then you can cross out anxious and put in whatever your particular thing might be and make it work for you. But for now, let's just make it an anxious person. So you've got an anxious person. So the usual advice from all the self-help schools out there that they're going to get is think positive, or think happy thoughts, or don't focus on the negative, or you shouldn't be so negative. You shouldn't be so negative is usually what their friends and family are going to tell them. But none of that is going to help much. Yes, it is possible to stop being anxious by refusing to allow negative thoughts and forcing yourself to think only positive thoughts, like through sheer brute force. But most people don't have the mental discipline to pull this off for any length of time. So the anxiety comes right back. And if it even goes away at all, because We aren't as in control of our thoughts as you may like to believe. Thoughts are an effect, not a cause, or not always a cause. They're very often both. You get locked in a vicious circle. The thoughts can start off as an effect and then later become a cause, but they very often don't start with us as we choose to have a thought. They can very often be an effect. Like a person enters into an uncomfortable situation that they perceive as stressful, and their body responds physiologically. The jaw clenches, the muscles around the eyes get tight, digestion shuts down, and the stress hormone cortisol is released into the bloodstream. And this physiological state of the body is felt as the emotion called anxiety. And then all this information is transmitted to the brain, where the mind sees its job as being to come up with a reason that explains the anxiety. And they've actually verified this in laboratory experiments where they've hooked people's brains up to electrodes, and then they stimulate a part of the brain that, for example, causes the arm to go up. So like the arm goes up. So they flip the switch and the person's arm goes up. And then they ask him, why did you raise your arm? And the person says, well, I was going to scratch my head, but then I changed my mind. And they completely believe that, because the mind needs to supply a reason for why their arm suddenly went up. They did not have the thought, my head itches and I'm going to scratch it. Their arm went up because the laboratory guy pressed a button and stimulated that part of the brain. But then immediately the mind comes in and supplies the reason. And then the person 100% believes that the thought came first. My head itches, I'm going to scratch it. Then the arm went up. And so when the person is feeling this emotion of anxiety, the mind sees its job as being to supply a reason for the anxiety. So a thought might arise like, my boss hates me. She's going to fire me. I'm going to lose my job. How will I survive then? Thoughts like that might arise. And then the person thinks they feel anxious. Excuse me. So then the person 100% believes they feel anxious because they're worried about their job. But the anxiety arose first, then the thought came later to justify it. Anxiety is very often a free-floating thing, like arising from unconscious fears, not related to anything happening right now. But once the mind supplies the thought/cause, my boss hates me, the person will find it almost impossible to think otherwise. And we're telling them, think happy thoughts. We're telling them, don't think your boss hates you. And they're working with affirmations and they're trying to change. But as long as the physiological state remains unchanged, it's very difficult for the resultant thought to be changed. And even evidence that the person might experience in their actual relationship with their boss, that their boss doesn't hate them, will be reinterpreted or misinterpreted by them to prove that their boss does hate them. And this gets into what we talk about when we talk in breathwork, when I talk about personal law, how you reinterpret things to make your personal law true. So, and this would be like a specific negative, my boss hates me. So the anxiety arose, and then the person has the thought to explain the anxiety. My boss hates me and I'm going to get fired. And then they see something in their relationship with their boss, which might be evidence that their boss doesn't hate them, but they reinterpret it to prove that their boss does hate them. For example, their boss asks them to lead an important project, not because the boss thinks highly of their capabilities, but because they're being set up to fail. So the boss will have an excuse to fire them. And then those thoughts then become a cause, creating even more anxiety. So you get this vicious circle that's really hard to break out of. And, again, in a situation like this with the anxious person, who's trying to heal the mind with the mind. Remember the quote we began with, the body can heal the mind faster than the mind can heal the mind. So trying to use the mind to heal the mind is trying to change your thoughts. So like in this situation, trying to heal the mind with the mind, the usual advice would be for the person to like reprogram their mind by maybe writing positive affirmations, like my boss loves me. I now have a positive relationship with my boss. My boss values my input. My success is assured. Things like that. And, make no mistake, this can work, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of discipline. And there's an easier, more effective way, and a faster way, which is using the body to heal the mind. The body can heal the mind faster than the mind can heal the mind. So like in breath work, you simply lay down and breathe in a way that induces relaxation. And because the breath can access the autonomic nervous system, it can be used to change the body's physiological state very quickly. So the jaw unclenches, the eyes relax, the digestive system returns to normal, and the body no longer responds by releasing cortisol into the bloodstream, the stress hormone. And this new physiological state is felt as, the emotion called, say, serenity, right? And of course, then the mind does its job of supplying a rational reason for this new emotion. And now, finally, the person is able to think happy, quote unquote, happy, positive thoughts. One of the problems is that we break things up. We tend to think of the mind, the emotions, and the body as three distinct and separate things. We just do that automatically. It's the product of our upbringing in the Western analytical tradition. That's when they talk about how you don't go to college to learn something, you go to college to learn how to learn. That's what you're learning. You're learning the Western analytical tradition, the process of analysis. Because the word analysis actually comes from an ancient Greek word meaning to break up. And it refers to this process of breaking up a complex topic or a subject or a substance into smaller pieces so that you can look at each smaller piece and get a better understanding than you do if you're just like overwhelmed with the whole big picture. So we break things up. We dissect animals. We take complex substances and break them up into their constituent parts. And we take complex things like human beings and break them up into their constituent parts so we can study each part separately, mind, body, emotion. And that has its value, but we forgot to put everything back together again. And the truth, of course, is that the mind, the emotions, and body are not three separate things. I mean, if you don't have a body, how can you have a mind? If you don't have a mind, how can you have emotions? The mind, body, and emotions are an integrated, interdependent whole, functioning together so seamlessly that any change in one cannot but have an effect on the other two. And of the three, it turns out the body state is the easiest to change and the breath is the easiest way to change it. Like when I'm working with people, I use a combination approach of working with both the mind and the breath for even better results, which is another Leonard Orr quote. The mind and the breath are the king and queen of human consciousness. The mind and the breath are the king and queen of human consciousness. So, it's good to have the queen only in your corner. It's good to have the king only in your corner. But if you can, you want to have both of them in your corner, right? So, and like, and it gets people away from the self-blame of like, I'm suffering from anxiety because I can't control my thoughts. I can't think happy thoughts and it's all my fault. Like it's like this blaming the victim mentality that a lot of well-meaning people slip into without even realizing it. And I really get annoyed at that. I mean, for me, there's no better feeling in the world than like watching someone's face light up with joy after they've healed something they've been struggling with for years, but have also been blaming themselves for it because they just couldn't just think happy thoughts.